when you think of art, and when you think of art for money, it's almost the impossible dream. It's almost living the impossible dream, art for money.
Mm,
You know, so many people are now acquainted with the art of Basquiat. He basically died penniless,
yeah.
you know. So the money that he got, or the money that came from his art, came after
Yes.
his death.
Yeah.
You know, and you look at other artists like Bob Marley, something very similar. He wasn't making that type of money when he was recording with Tough Gong for so many years. Later on, after his death, people revisited everything that he meant to music and to the socially conscious man and woman. Now you see, you know, now his catalog is worth millions. And I just say that to say, with any art, film, print art, music, and I'm only speaking from my own personal experiences. When it comes from a place of love, or it comes from a place where you almost feel like you have to do it. I have
Mm,
to, story. I have to draw this picture. I have to write this song. I have to get it out. I have to share it with the world. When it comes to art, in that respect, the win is just completing it and getting it out there.
yo, 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 yo. This is Justin Brandon, and we are back with the Art of Man podcast experience. This week we have a special episode. I'm sitting down with a person who really inspires me. He's a creative. He's an educator. He's a poet, an artist, a filmmaker. He's a number of things, including my brother. What you're going to hear coming up next is a great conversation we had, sitting down talking about independent filmmaking, the responsibility of art, and the responsibility and the goal of being an artist, and how to create even in the particular times, some trying times. Once again, it was a great conversation with Terrell Tuggle, owner of Film Bomb Brooklyn, and that's coming up next. Yo, 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 yo. It's Justin Tuggle, and I'm back with another episode of the Art of Man podcast. And you guys, man, I have a special guest with me today. I'm doing an interview series in which we're going to cover a couple of things talking about building businesses, creating during this pandemic. And I have a special guest, and it's actually an honor to have him. He's my brother, Terrell
Peace,
Tuggle. You
peace,
there? You
peace.
there?
I'm there. Peace, peace.
I hear you. I hear you. Yo, how have you been?
I'm well. All things considered, I'm here at the epicenter
Uh-huh.
of this pandemic. All things considered, I'm well. I'm well. Everybody in the family is good.
Good, 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 good. And what does this mean for you? Because you're a creative. What is this doing for you?
Well, as a creative, I've always been one who always likes to leave the home, go outside, and live a little bit.
Hmm.
And based on my experiences, come back and use that as I guess I would say inspiration to a degree. And
Mm.
seeing as though everybody has been on at home, it's taken a little bit away from that, but it hasn't stopped um, my creativity. Part of my creative process is going outside and experiencing life, but there's another part of it that,
Okay.
based on my experiences and based on my own personal exploits, there's just certain stories, there's just certain things that I want to do, and I don't necessarily need the outside world's influence in order to do those things.
Okay. So as a creative, what are you exploring now? Like I know personally, but what is your main discipline? What's your main focus?
Right now, it's film.
Okay. And you're an independent filmmaker, and
I'm an
you've
independent filmmaker. I have two independent film companies, Film
yep.
BK LLC and Adult Film Production LLC. And by film, I mean I'm really working in film. I'm no longer focusing on digital cinema. My focus now is using more antiquated equipment to tell my stories. So I'm using a Super 8, a Super 35, and a Super 16.
Wow. Does that present like any particular challenges?
Oh, many challenges, and the main challenge with dealing with film or trying to use film it's very expensive.
Mm,
The advent of technology and digital cinema helped in that respect, where you could get the same type of filmic look and the same type of filmic, I guess, image with digital digital cameras. But because I was always such a big fan of real film and the way it looks, the way it preserves, the way
hmm
it breathes, and the experience that I've had with real film from the beginning, it's always something that I knew in the back of my mind when I got into narrative or short filmmaking that one of my main focuses would be returning to real film and finding a way to be able to facilitate a production on my own, which is usually with a shoestring budget that I'm able to put together from my own income.
Okay. What inspired that? Was there like a particular moment? Is it a particular film that it's
What inspired just wanting to do film
yeah,
or use film
to
and,
both
when
to
telling
get
stories?
in the film industry, but let's start with using the particular celluloid, actually using film.
Well, starting with that, it's something that has always been a passion of mine. I always have been interested in doing things that will be long standing,
Mm,
something that I could create that would have a shelf life,
yeah.
so to speak. And I noticed that when I look back on certain titles, um, films in particular, certain titles that have always been close to me and very personal, like Coolie High and Do the Right Thing. All of
Yeah.
these films were actually done on film,
hmm
and I knew being an independent filmmaker at this stage of my career, using my own money to fund my projects, that it would be tough because I wouldn't have the money
Yep.
to rent those big Panavision cameras. I wouldn't have the money to buy an exorbitant amount of film so I could just shoot for the sake of shooting. But I did
hmm
know that what it would help me to do was fine tune my skills. And so my storyboards had to be different. So the line reading had to be different. Things had to be more perfected in pre-production before we actually went to shoot.
Mm.
And it's actually helped me as a filmmaker in so many ways, more than I can even explain.
Are there any particular tools that you use um to prepare? Do you storyboard?
Well, there's different programs that you can use to storyboard. I have a past in art in that I did draw regularly as
Uh
a
huh.
child, and I just used that as a part of one of many creative outlets. And so I do all of my storyboards myself. And listen, I'm not the greatest artist, but
hmm
I am able to convey thematically to the actors and as well as the cinematographers what I want for a scene. And
Yep.
for me, it's not just about the positions of where people are or the vantage point of the camera as much as it is the underlying sentiment of the scene and the
hmm
colors tonally creating a mood for the viewer.
Got you. Got you. I like that. Before we go on, I want to actually I'll probably back up a little bit, and because you brought up something of when you were younger and you doing art when you were younger. So what do you think initiated the creative bug in you?
Cognitively, I have to think back to my parents.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of birthdays at the theater. I spent a lot of time at the museum.
Mm,
I spent a lot of time with my aunt in the library. And
yep.
more importantly, with all of my family members, we all spent a lot of time at the movies.
Mm,
Growing up on Gates Avenue as a child, it was a very dangerous neighborhood, and it still is. And I believe that it was my parents and my aunt. I believe that it was a vision for them to take me out of certain environments and expose me to other art in an attempt to
mm,
not only give my creativity um, uh, uh, something else to utilize, but I think they wanted to let me know that there were other things outside of what was going on directly in my neighborhood. There were other experiences needed
Yeah.
for me to get a more of an understanding of life holistically. And
Mm.
so I always had a lot of books in my room. Since I was maybe 2 or 3 years old, I always had my own library, and every week or every month, there was always a new edition from my mom or my dad. And oftentimes the books were further ahead than where I was in the moment. But because they knew that surrounding me with this information, exposing me to new ideas and new art, that it would eventually have an effect on me,
Mm.
is why I know that now I find solace in creating art. And I still draw. I don't necessarily show it to people,
Yeah.
but I still draw because the outlet is something that's it's very personal to me. I still write poetry. I don't necessarily read it to people
Yep.
or in front of people, but it's something that's very still very personal to
Yep.
me. But I found now that I'm more comfortable with sharing the visual aspects of my artistic creativity through film and music video.
Interesting.
And I also wanted to mention, you asked a question earlier about, what were the experiences that led to me wanting to create or carve a career out for myself in film. Growing up on Bedford-Stuyvesant on Gates Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it was around maybe 86, 87, that locally there was a gentleman who was filming movie on my corner.
Mm.
I'm on Gates between Lewis and Stuyvesant. He was actually filming a movie on my corner, and that entire summer I spent on the corner of Stuyvesant watching this young man film. And his head cinematographer was black, the director was black, most of the talent was black, and he was telling a black story in the neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
that I had originated in. That movie would later go on to be known as Do the Right Thing. And not only did it change my life, but it changed the lives, I want to believe, of anybody who was there to bear witness to that experience. And it was the first time that I had actually seen a black person at the helm of a production. And then I started to do my own research, and I realized that some of the movies that I had liked before, some of the movies that had given me so much inspiration, like a Coolie High,
Yep.
like a Witch Up, like a Last Dragon, they had also been done by black directors.
Yep.
And it was then where the seed was planted that one day I may find myself in a privileged position to be a storyteller, like those men who I mentioned.
Yeah. And that movie that was being filmed, that was Do the Right Thing.
That was Do the Right Thing.
Yep.
In
Yep.
fact, you and our late grandmother are actually in a scene.
Mm. The Back of Us, right? You told me that story because I was younger.
Yes,
So
that's right. That's
yeah.
right.
That's so interesting because what we're trying to do here at this podcast, I mean, the premise of the podcast is that it's called The Art of Man, and that's because it's the belief that every person comes into this world a blank slate. I believe psychologists call it tabula rasa, and we're a canvas, if you will, a blank canvas. That canvas is assembled by God, so we come with some form, but it is our parents who start to paint on us and start to really shape us, shape who we are, and then it goes further into our education and our environment and all these things. And when
it's something you should mention that because when I hark back to my humble beginnings, my mother always made it a point of emphasis to put me in the best academic situations. Because she was an educator, she knew of certain schools, certain teachers, certain administrators, and certain academic environments more conducive to the to the child that I was. And once she found anything that I was interested in, if it was sports, if it was art, she would always find other resources for me. So on Saturdays, as a child for many years, I spent Saturdays at Pratt Institute doing art. I would spend afternoons with my art teacher, and I want to give a shout out to her, Miss Sawyer, at 308.
Yep.
I spent many afternoons with Miss Sawyer, working in art, working with other artists. And all of it was in an effort to cultivate the artist in me.
Yep.
And it was there where I, began to love artists like Romar Bearden and loving the idea of collage and the idea of creating pieces that were abstract yet spoke to something absolute, something focused. Like some of his works on Black life during the Harlem Renaissance. That helped to shape my mind and the way that I saw the world.
Absolutely.
Even when it came to graffiti, I always saw the beauty in graffiti. I always saw the relevance in graffiti, the idea that whoever the artist was actually saying, I was here. It was no different for me than America wanting to plant their flag on the moon. It's a symbol, something that represents your time here on Earth. And now, working in film, that's my focus. In making something classic, something that can stand the test of time, and something that would be here even after me and speak to some of the things that I was interested in, some of the things that I was trying to say about the time that I spent here, the people I spent it with.
Love it. And obviously that was passed on because as you were shaped, as your canvas was painted on by these experiences and your art teachers and our parents putting you in certain programs, that was passed on to me because you exploring art and me being around you exploring art and listening to the music that you listen to and watching the film, some of the films that you exposed me to, that continued to shape me. And that's what we want to do with this podcast. We want to be able to continue to mold and shape the creators of tomorrow, the business leaders of tomorrow, the individuals of tomorrow, just in general. And it's obvious that it's cyclical. What the experience that one person has, they pass on to another. But as you speak, I'm interested in your journey as a filmmaker so far. I believe you've done a bunch of music videos. Is that correct?
Yes, music videos, commercials, and I do have a short that I filmed many years ago that was focused. It was centered around a Biggie Smalls classic. It was sort of like the impetus to what you saw with what Murder Inc. did with Tales.
Yeah.
So it was, and I want also your listening audience to understand something. Even at an early age, you and I would have intricate discussions on film. And it was more than just what was going on in the surface. We always talked about the pretext and the subtext of film and how it made us feel, how the camera moved. All of those things, it was like steel sharpening steel. You were the first of the family to actually make a film and make a few films. And this was in your earlier high school days. And then, I felt, so great to be afforded the opportunity to work with you on some of those earlier works. And then after high school, when you went to film school and you made a few films and a couple of stuff, and, you always made me a part of the production. It was funny because in my mind, I always thought that eventually we would be like the Hughes brothers or the Coen brothers.
Yeah.
And it was actually something that actually it happened organically. Our love for film, but I have to reference our aunt Annette. She was always a lover of cinema, and she always made it her business on weekends, at least 2 or 3 times out the month, all year long. We would spend time at the cinema. And our time at the cinema, it wasn't just for one show. We would stay and watch 3 or 4 movies of different genres because she had an appreciation for film. And then she also appreciated what we were interested in. We would share that love. And, it was something that became like it's a family tradition. Film is actually a family tradition for our family.
It absolutely is.
I have to give a shout out to Annette Lyons, our aunt. Because her always taking me out to the museums, always taking me out to the libraries, and in particular to the cinema, it definitely created a creative synergy in me to want to one day be able to tell my own story.
Yes.
But I spent a lot of time, as you had mentioned, doing music videos. And in 2011, when I started Film Barn BK, my focus was to illuminate some of the talent that I was around. I had so many people who I was around who were poets, who were singers, who were rapping, who were producing. I said, what I want to do is I want to make my catalog, my creative cohort, and most of my early work was just related to people who I was closely associated with, and still closely associated with. You know, I started working early with a gentleman by the name of Matty Tosca.
Yep.
He was actually on tour for one of his projects at the time, and we went out to Miami for Hip Hop Weekly, and I started working with some other people in the industry out there. That was my first professional trip, and he had taken me out to do videography. So it was the first time Film Bomb BK was actually being flown out to a place to work, you know, and he had such an appreciation for the visual language that I was exhibiting that I was for a time exclusively his videographer. And his brother, Adrian Toscano, who's now the owner of True Light Films, because of our work trying to visually represent his brother, he now has his own working film company, and he has several short films, hundreds of music videos, and he's one of the greatest music videos working today. I actually have retired from just working on music video, and he is now. But what happened was, creatively, we started to push each other to fine tune our skills, and now we find ourselves in a position where we're ready to do short and narrative features.
Mm-hmm. So what inspires you? Because when you tell me the story of how you have it seems like a creative group that allows you to push each other. What keeps you going? What is there a particular type of story that you're trying to continually tell? Is there a road that you're going down? Is there something you're trying to achieve?
With me, without giving too much about my latest short film, Away, I spent a lot of time in the conscious community, in different denominations and different modalities and different schools of thought. And what I found in film, and I don't just mean particularly black film, or film done from a or directed by a black person, or telling stories from a black perspective, I've noticed that there are certain things thematically that have never been represented. And maybe that has been in the past because they weren't bankable. But now we're in a position in the world with everything that's going on to kind of not necessarily rewrite history, but moving forward, we can introduce new things. And that's part of what I'm working toward now, bringing more consciousness to black film. And not in a finite way where I'm preaching to the viewing audience about what I believe, but in a way where I'm just opening up the idea of having more conversation centered around consciousness. So that's my focus now. Not only that, but I have something that a term that I've coined. I call it urban sci-fi. It's also kind of been coined by many others as Afrofuturism. But I'm kind of trying to combine the idea of that along with black consciousness. You know, you can kind of consider me the Octavia Butler of film. That's my focus right now.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's beautiful because I mean, it brings like certain films to mind, like a Kin, Protect the Block. I think with but I believe those films weren't even made. They were about the African experience. They had a lot of black people in them, but they weren't told by a black filmmaker, which I believe actually creates a specific dynamic. Because if you look at just like a movie like Black Panther, had that been done 10 years ago and had they got the big it guy, which was probably not going to be a black filmmaker at that time, there's a different lens that you look at people when you aren't a part of those people, when you don't feel as
it's
connected.
funny that you should mention that because I heard something that Denzel said. He and I don't want to I'm just going to give you what I got from what he said because I don't want to misquote him.
Gotcha. Yep.
But he's saying that when it comes to direction in film, especially when you have a film that has that's thematically about Black life, there are cultural differences.
Mm.
And he was explaining what he meant by cultural differences. He says, whether you're male or female, grow up in a Black home, you understand the sense of the curling iron burning on the stove.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You understand the scent of the hair on the back of the Black woman's neck as the curling iron goes through. You understand the scent of that burning hair, and then maybe putting margarine or butter or maybe some Vaseline on it after.
Mm-hmm.
Or you understand that screech or that scream when that curling iron hits the back of the neck. And those experiences are aching to us culturally.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that there's a varied amount of different experiences in different cultures, but it's specific to you. And you can tell when someone is telling a story from the vantage point of experience. At least I'm able to in certain instances.
Agreed.
And so oftentimes, especially when we hark back to the blaxploitation era, those were some great films to me.
Yeah.
As a cinephile, those were great films to me. The issue a lot of people had and why they call it blaxploitation was because a lot of the directors of those films that I love, a lot of those directors were not Black.
Mm-hmm.
And so they felt that when the directors weren't Black, cinematographers weren't Black, the production companies weren't Black, what they were actually doing was exploiting the African American experience.
Yep.
But for me, just having the opportunity to see us on the big screen, even if it wasn't the best representation of us, some of those movies, where you had these pimps and you had these pushers, the Mac to me is still a great film, So I learned at an early age from other educators that you have to, that you can be taught and you can learn from all cultures. And all different cultures can actually experience part of your cultures and have a story to tell about their experience in your culture. And it might not be complete holistically, but at the same time, they do have a right to experience and then tell their stories as they experienced it. The problem I feel was it was no balance. There wasn't enough of us then telling stories from our experiences, and there's still not enough of us now telling stories of our experiences. There's still never been a Black director to win the Academy Award for Best Director. But when I look at the list, and I think it's about maybe 6 or 7 directors that have actually been nominated for that award, they're amazing directors. But you start to wonder as you work in this industry, what do you want from your career?
Yeah.
Do you want the accolades? Do you want the notoriety? Or do you want to create experiences visually for people to say, I understand that. That's aching to my own experience. I'm actually seeing myself up there, and maybe it's not going to sell millions or billions of dollars like Black Panther.
Yep.
But what it may do is inspire that viewer to also want to tell their story. And that's where I want to be. I've always loved directors like Melvin Van Peebles, Mario Van Peebles, Gordon Parks, Charles Burnett, Julie Bass, that whole L.A. rebellion. But there was one guy in that L.A. rebellion named John Mafanaka. He was, when I was younger, he was my favorite director. And he made films that didn't necessarily showcase Black life in the most positive light. He made Penitentiary 1 and Penitentiary 2. These are jail movies, and they are bad, But I love those movies. And there was one he did called Black Sisters Revenge, and our father, he actually bought that film for me, Black Sisters Revenge. It's also titled MMA, if anybody ever wants to look for it. But that movie helped shape my life. It helped to change my life. And so then I started to try to unearth other black directors in that ilk that were making socially conscious pieces that didn't necessarily showcase us in the best light, but they had a certain realness to them, something that I innately connected to.
Mm.
And that's what I want of my career. It would not necessarily be validated by an award as much as it would be by inspiring the next generation of filmmakers who want to showcase and tell black socially conscious stories.
You know, I want to move back because you said it shaped you. In how, in what way?
Well, Black Sisters Revenge is also entitled MMA. It's a story about a young girl whose family was having some issues, and they weren't able to take care of her. So they called her aunt, who was actually living, I believe, in Watts. And they said, you know, we're going to send MMA to stay with you. Now, her aunt already had a bunch of kids. And the husband said, listen, I know I have a good job, and yeah, we do have the extra room, but we already have a lot of responsibility. But the aunt says, no. MMA needs us. We need to open our house to her. So they let MMA come to live with them. And they had a son who was in college at the time. So he said, you know, MMA, you should think about taking classes. Yeah. Why don't you go to the college and, you know, just experience other black children working for the future and see where you can find, where you feel you are best suited. So she goes out, she gets connected to a guy who's kind of part of the underworld. He ends up going to prison, and what she does is she organizes the entire community to start to do different activities to generate money to get him out. But while he's in prison, she edifies herself, not only on leadership, but on just social community active policies and processes, just in order to improve the not only the lives of her family that she's currently living with, but everyone who had brought her in and made her feel like she was now a part of the community. And so she ended up becoming like what I would have to say was considered back then a community advisor. You know, but she ends up picking the wrong guy. He comes out of prison and he disrespects her. But what he finds is when he comes out of prison, that MMA is no longer this country girl. I think she came from Louisiana to LA. She was no longer this country girl. She was this powerful black queen that had earned the respect of the entire community. So when he had disrespected, you know, he had been like the Devo of the community. When he came out of prison, she had won over the entire community by fighting for civil rights, not only his, but other people from the community. And so there's this scene at the end where he's disrespecting her, and the entire community comes out, and everybody denounces his actions, and, you know, she beats him up. And, of course, there's some folly and there's some old school stuff to it. It's kind of like, why is that even in there? But as a young child watching, I said to myself, you know, there's something here that's important. You have a black woman in a leadership capacity, early 70s. You know, she's respected by the board member and the gang member, and she's earned their respect because she's fought not only for herself but for their rights. And even as a child, that spoke to me. You know, so it was no different than when you know, Bugging Out was fighting for some black faces up on that wall.
Yep.
You know, those conversations, that dialogue, it didn't miss me. You know, when we talk about Michael Schultz and some of all of the, you know, the great films in his catalog, you know, like Last Dragon, but when I first saw Which Way Is Up, I was a big fan of Richard Pryor. I used to sit at home and listen to Our Father's Richard Pryor album until the wee morning. You know, there was this character written called the Man. I guess the Man was like the symbol for right-wing America, white America. And he would wear red, and it would shine like a diamond. And anybody who was associated with him, black, white, or any other denomination, the way you would know that they were in concert with him is they would wear this ring. And anytime he would showcase it, he would superimpose it. And he had like this music that would play in the background that would let you know this guy is working for the man. You know,
yeah.
So what he had done, there was this idea of the man being the equivalent of all that was holding black people back here in America. We would say at that time, it's the man. So when he had actually tried to create the physical representation of that, and then he made it almost like a MacGuffin throughout the film, I was like, this it didn't get past me. It wasn't just for entertainment value. It spoke something to me socially consciously, And I said, there are ways that you can bring information. There are ways that you can make people more socially conscious and aware without preaching to them. You can't victimize and prophesize to the same people. And that's what it seemed like a lot of things were happening in film where either, people were trying to jam down your throat, do it this way, or they were just trying to jam down your throat. This is just the way black people do it. There is a way you can actually create a social awareness and consciousness with your film without being too preachy. It might be a fine line, but I've seen it done time and time again, and people miss it all the time. I think that's why directors like Tyler Perry get such a bad rap. They miss the message, and maybe it's that they don't like the messenger or the presentation. But I've always been the type of person that can eat the meat and spit the bones, and I can focus on the prophecy and not the prophet. And so Tyler Perry, he's one of my favorites. Just like Barry Jenkins is one of my favorites, just like Ava DuVernay is one of my favorites. Yeah, Tyler Perry is one of my favorites too. Look at what he's done in black film. Look at what he's done for the culture of black film. And so that's why, it was those kind of films, Black Sisters Revenge, Ralph Bosky, who was actually a white man. He had this cartoon back in the day. It's called Coonskin, another socially conscious piece. All of these pieces, our father, he actually had in the catalog. And I would watch these films. Even as a young person, I would watch these films. And what I experienced through these films was not only a certain level of edification and certain social awareness. What it gave me was just, I think, a starting point from my own scholarship and consciousness, wanting to learn more. If I was going to be an agent of change, I needed to go out and edify myself on certain finer points of other denominations so I could have an understanding, and then we can have intellectual discourse without confusion or without either trying to assert who is superior. That was really my focus as a child, and how I'm making it my focus now as a filmmaker. I can only leave up to the viewer, and I hope that they can experience it the way that I set out for them to.
Where does that responsibility come from for you? Because you see that there are people who are interested in entertainment for the sake of entertainment, which is fine. But where does that come from for you? What you feel? It seems like you feel a responsibility for your community. Seems like you feel a responsibility for the culture. Where does that come from?
Again, I would have to give reverence in that respect to my parents. My mother always being an educator and always working in formal education for the Department of Education for the state of New York. I remembered, when she would come home and do lesson plans and the time she would put into that. I remember the phone calls to students' homes, and I remember the conversation she would have away from the school about her students, and how much they meant to her. And I remember seeing the exchanges between the community and her based on her relationship to those schools. And I realized she wasn't only a mother to me at home, she was a mother to the community at that school. My father, our father. At the vocational foundation, he was like a professional mentor. And when I went with him many times to the vocational foundation, I experienced him different through other people's experiences experiences with him. They would tell me little stories of, your dad did this for me. Your dad explained that for me. If it wasn't for your father. And it was, I was getting these responses from anybody and everybody who spoke of my mother and father. And then when I went to school, I was always in a privileged position to always be mentored by great men and women. People who really just had my best interests in heart. And let me tell you, everyone wasn't just black.
Yes.
I really great educators of all ethnicities at PFCOA and at Bishop Loughlin, Memorial High School, all in Brooklyn, who really worked as if they had an invested interest in me, aside from what they were doing professionally. And I think what it did was it created a moral compass in me that it was as important to teach and give back as it was to learn and receive. My mom had a saying back in the days, our mom, she had a saying, it's not yours because you can give it away. And later on, that saying started to resonate with me. And it made me want to write this book that'll be coming out this year. It's called For the Edification of the Urban Independent Filmmaker. It'll also be followed by a free course for 8th graders and high schoolers to learn the business of film. How to be a working filmmaking business, starting from creating an LLC to post-production on your first project, whatever it is, commercial, video, film, a movie, etc. But it was my experiences with great mentors, my first two being my mother and father. But my experiences with having great mentors gave me, I want to say, a social responsibility to do the same for the generation coming behind.
That's great. That's great. Obviously, us growing up in the same household, I believe those same things have rubbed off on me. And but where you, I believe that as this goes out into the internet world, there are going to be some filmmakers who are watching this, and beyond the artistry, there's the business part of it, because the business part of it supports our ability to be artists. And so what is it like being an independent filmmaker when it comes to the business of it? Is it as lucrative as people believe? Or
Jay, I want to say this. I don't have all of the answers, but I can answer from my perspective.
Perfect.
It's lucrative, I'm sure, for some. But when you think of art, and when you think of art for money, it's almost the impossible dream. It's almost living the impossible dream, art for money. Some people are now acquainted with the art of Basquiat. He basically died penniless.
Yeah.
So the money that he got, or the money that came from his art, came after his death. When you look at other artists like Bob Marley, something very similar. He wasn't making that type of money when he was recording with Tough Gong for so many years. Later on, after his death, people revisited everything that he meant to music and to the socially conscious man and woman. Now you see, now his catalog is worth millions. And I just say that to say, with any art, film, print art, music, and I'm only speaking from my own personal experiences, when it comes from a place of love, or it comes from a place where you almost feel like you have to do it. I have to. I have to draw this picture. I have to write this song. I have to get it out. I have to share it with the world. When it comes to art, in that respect, the win is just completing it and getting it out there. If the reward that you're looking for is more than just the experience from the creation to the sharing, then you might not feel you've gained much without getting awards or without getting money, or you might not think the ends have justified the means.
Yeah.
But for a person like myself, uh, if if there was no industry for film, if there was no industry for video, but if I had the capacity to create these things, I would have created them for myself,
Mm.
just to watch it in my own crib, just for me. You know, we had VHS cameras in the house. Back then when I was doing poetry, I used to just film the community. And then
Yep.
I would cut in the poetry that I recorded at my friend's Ricardo house and make like these montages. For me, it was like a remote big collage in my head. These montages of images along with the words from the poetry. And that was really just for my own enjoyment.
Yep.
And I believe artists, or many of them, are doing the art with the intention of just creating and sharing what they've created. And there are those who are in a system where they've made some money, and in that monetized system, maybe now moving forward, they are continuing to make art with with the pursuit of making money in mind. But I have to believe, and this is only taken from my own experience, that initially as an artist, um, the only true deductive reasoning is you have to make it. You have to draw it. You
Yep.
have to sing. It might not be at Madison Square Garden. It may just be at the church. You know, your picture might not be showcased at the Met, but your grandmother will always have a place for it on her refrigerator. You know, and if you can experience the same joy from seeing it on her refrigerator as you can see it being showcased at the Met, then you'll feel fulfilled.
Mm.
So it's actually, for me, it's what you look to gain from it. But I think innately, it's about creating and then sharing the creation, not necessarily looking for the validation,
Yeah.
but wanting others to share in the experience of what you've created and see what that creation helps them to experience. Because when you relive it or you live it differently, vicariously through how they experience the art.
That's it. I mean, because I have these experiences where, like, you know, it almost hurts you to keep it in. You know, like it burns you not to make it. Like if you don't get it out, it's almost like you have like this artistic bucket inside of you, and it starts
Yes.
to fill up to the point where it's exploding and you have to dump it out. You know,
Yeah.
and if you don't get it out, it's almost cancerous to not let it go. And you know, any artist out there, you understand, you just got to let it go. You know, you really just have to put that pen on the paper, to turn the power on that camera, or if you're thinking about podcasting, hit that record button, because you have to let these things go. You just have to get them out at whatever level you are at this point. You know, because we're all going to grow, we're all going to get better, and we have to be satisfied with creating at all those levels. Creating your first short and letting it be terrible, but it was your
Yes.
first short, and let it be special to you. You know, all the
Yes.
way up to you making, you know, your $100 million film, if you ever get there, or being satisfied with a $10,000 budget, whatever that is for you.
You know, after, one of the greatest feelings after making a music video or even doing the short that I did, The People versus Biggie, just sitting with my friends who had been a part of the creative process, and others who hadn't, but who had waited to see what the end result was, and just experiencing it with them, and hearing somebody say, "Yo, bring that back, line that, oh man, that piece right there, oh," that those conversations, it didn't mean more to me if I was having those conversations on the Breakfast Club.
Mm.
You know, the people who are in my closest cohort are dope. When they validate something, it's really dope.
Yep.
And so it was enough for me to just have that shared experience with them. I felt the success just in that. And of course it ignited something else, or reignited something else in me to want to continue. Back in the days when I was in high school, I used to go down to the Nuyorican poetry spot and perform poetry. I remember a couple times Angel came down, but she didn't come to New York because she came to the Brooklyn Moon.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something about writing and then performing the poetry that was cathartic.
Mm.
And I think that we all were experiencing it that way. And everybody in here was there for the same experience we wanted to share. And we wanted to see what we would share, help others to either experience what we felt at the time or see how it made them feel as we were saying the words that we had written. And that for me was the success. Just getting up there and sharing. I ain't gonna front. I felt a sense of validation in the clap after.
Yeah, of course.
Sharing what I was there for.
I don't even know if I shared this story with you. The first time that I would say like I really knew when I was on stage in high school when I did the For Color Girls play, and I was doing my scene, and I was doing my monologue, and I remember it as a out of body experience, because I'm doing my scene, but I'm seeing myself, and at the same time I'm seeing the audience. And the thing that I remember was people at scooting up to the edge of their seat, and they were intently listening. And it was something intoxicating about that feeling, understanding that I was able to garner a person's attention, intense attention. And and attention is currency, and for a person to give that to you means a lot, because they can use that in many different ways. They can decide to give their attention to a number of things. But when they give that to you, there's a validation and also a responsibility, that I felt at that moment. And I knew that I had to be a performer at that moment. And then I subsequently end up having feelings about a similar feeling when I did the short film in high school, and we had the film festival. And one person after it came to me, and he just had this conversation. He was like, he was really just talking about the film. And he was like, I really like that character. And before that, I was like, I don't even know if people are getting what I'm trying to do with this. But just that one conversation was special enough that I got one person to be interested, one person to create a perspective based off of my perspective. And at the end of the day, that's something that I'm working hard to hold on to, because you can lose sight when you're getting in this creation. And we all live in a society where we need money to survive, but to not have the art be destroyed or suppressed by the need or the want for finances, and letting it be pure. And those pure moments are those moments when you're on the stage and you're doing your poetry, and you're feeling that connection with everybody in the crowd, of we're all sharing this experience with each other, or when you're shooting, when you got your camera out on the street and you see people who are just intently looking at something that you're creating. No matter who it is, whether it's, millions of people watching or one person watching, that's still an amazing thing. That's still an amazing achievement for one person to say, I like what you did here, or a million people to say, I like what you did here. Is still something amazing to achieve. And just artists holding on to that fact that, that you can be free to create, and I think that's like what every artist is really striving for, just to have the freedom of creativity.
Yes. It's funny that you explained it that way, but that also speaks to the question you asked about feeling a social obligation or social conscious obligation in making film and what you say in film. When you're as a using filmmaking as an art, if you think of it this way, and the picture that you're painting, it has the words like a song, it has the lyrics. Then it has the underlying sentiment, which may be just the your experiences with it to this juncture in film. When you are able to tell the story through prose, then the visual aesthetic, and then you already have you're aware that it needs to be subtext in the context, and in that there's a social consciousness. I think that's what's so important about what I'm doing right now with film is that when someone cheers or gives you that time and you use that time to tell and show and then I guess I'm looking for the words or trying to you you inject either through suggestion or directly through the dialogue certain conscious aspects regarding life. The conversations that happen after someone watches the film not only speaks to what they saw, but what you were trying to say. And those filmmakers are the ones who I'm more connected to. Not only did they show something that connected to me, however, but it was what I thought they were trying to say with the piece. And the fact that they thought enough of the viewer to try to say something. They thought enough of the art form to think that it was important through it to convey something. And I think that's why, this is what I've always been meant to do.
I believe that's why certain films and certain genres resonate. I mean, if you look at it's definitely a sci-fi action film, like The Matrix. It resonates because they were trying to say something. When you look at the Terminator, you know there is something being explored. When you go to one of our favorite filmmakers, Spike Lee, Jungle Fever, More Better Blues, there's an exploration happening. It's almost as if where you're taking the place of an astronaut, and the filmmaker is like piloting you around this world you may have that looks unfamiliar, but that world becomes very interesting to you, and you land on that world and you're living through these beings that you've never met before. The best films are journeys, and journeys into experiences that you haven't experienced before, worlds that you haven't seen before, adventures. Yeah, I mean it's an amazing power to wield, and it's important for, I think, every artist, every person to take that power seriously, especially people who are given gifts. And I believe there are people who are gifted with the ability and a vision to create and wield this power, and hopefully we're all using it properly.
I agree, 100%. I'm hesitant in certain remarks to certain things because I don't want to assert myself as a master of the art.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is film a journey, but my filmmaking experience is a journey.
Yeah.
One that I still feel like I'm just scratching the surface of. So, for your listeners, I'm not asserting that I'm a master in the art of filmmaking. What I am is a student of the art of filmmaking, the same as I'm a student in the art of life, living, under the means and conditions in which you find yourself, and it's the same way with filmmaking. You make what you have the means to make at the time based on your situation and circumstances as far as financing. So, that's been my approach. I'm constantly working and trying to edify myself on certain finer points, but I'm not losing sight of why, it's so important to me. It's just what we were just talking about. It's giving somebody or creating the opportunity, conversation on what I was trying to say. That's what I look forward to. I just want the viewing audience to have those conversations with this character and that part of the dialogue. What was he trying to say here?
Yeah.
You know, and then have opportunities to come. You know, now I'm gonna say this: have opportunities to come with some of the viewers who are fans or interested into the film, and then have conversations with them. You know, I used to go to. It's crazy. You know, people will write books and they'll have book signings, but then they'll have these readings where they'll just do excerpts of books. So, you know, I would always go to different excerpt readings from Walter Mosley. It's my favorite author, especially at the time. You know, and he would, someone would say, you know, Mr. Mosley, when you wrote so-so book, the person would have the book. He said, well, read the lines out to me. The person would stand up in front of the audience, read out the lines, and then he would explain to them in the moment what's going on in his life, what's going on in the character's lives, and then he would give like a backward narrative on the character that really wasn't even introduced in the book, but he would show you from the vantage point from which he was writing. So you can understand why the character was what he had experienced and why he was experiencing the moment this way. And I always look forward, maybe one day, you know, doing films where I could have not necessarily readings, but we would show clips of films. People would ask questions like, what did you mean when the whole scene was red? And this, you know, I always wanted to do that with directors. You hear me, Jay? I always wanted to sit with Spike and, you know, John Singleton, God bless the dead, and ask him about certain scenes, you know, and, you know, what was the context and why, you know, when you wrote that scene when Trey get out the car, you know, how many different ways did you see that happening? Was that always a part of it? You know, just little, you know, things of that nature. Or I want to know, you know, little questions like in the Hughes Brothers when they did Menace to Society. When you guys use Love and Happiness for Al Green, did you always want to use that song during the drive-by opening scene? Or was there other songs you guys that talked about? You know, just little questions that only true lovers of the films themselves would even care to know. You know, that's always been a vision of mine to make something with people who want to come and talk about it, context and subtext films, and whether or not they liked it and what they experienced through it. That's all that conversation, you know, about art. I think it's really where certain artists leave a greater impression on the world. It's the conversation centered around their art, even after they're gone. You know, it's like people talking about, you know, Van Gogh's Blue Period. You know, if it was Van Gogh's Blue Period, you know, those kinds of things. Like, you know, I had a conversation with someone recently about Basquiat. This person was an artist, and one now that's gaining a lot of notoriety. He'll remain nameless, but he questioned certain aspects of Basquiat's art. You know, but to me, I didn't even explain, you know, say this to him when we were having a conversation. To me, greatest piece about even the idea of Basquiat was that we were having a conversation about him. He was still a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And I do know that there's this conversation about his art. The same way there's just conversations about artists and their art.
Yeah.
But being a part of that artistic conversation and where those conversations go, that's where, you know, my career focuses. What are they saying about what I was trying to say?
Yep. You see, and that's where, like, as we go on our artistic journey, we're growing. But as we're creating the art and people are having the conversations about art, we're sparking the conversation and the seeds for their growth. You know, so that, like, you know, it becomes exponential. And I think that's one of the beauties of art is that, you know, it's an exponential thing. It's something that happens. You know, people are constantly talking about films from 30 years ago, and those things are shaping them, shaping their mind through they've when they watch it and when they have these conversations. And there's not many things that do that. And I've always felt like that the artist is one of the most important individuals that people don't necessarily see as important because it goes under the auspices of entertainment. But the people in every situation run to art. They run to art when they're sad. They run to art when they're happy. They run to art to change their mood. They run to art to capture a certain mood. People run to art before they run to medicine, and there's a beauty in that. There's a beauty in that, and I'm thankful to be a part of that and to be on this artistic journey.
Yes. And I want to say this also to the listeners, how important it is to continue to create art, whatever your art is, whatever your choice of art.
Yep.
You can liken it to when, you're listening to maybe a YouTube playlist or a playlist of music and you come across an artist. And then you go into that artist's discography and you unearth other things about that artist. And then there's a feeling you get from putting somebody on to that artist. Did you hear of? Have you ever heard of?
Yeah.
The thing about creating art is you never know when someone can unearth or discover what you left of value.
Yep.
If you put everything you had into it and add all of your experiences, good and bad, to it as a representation of what you've learned, there is a time where someone will find it and it will inspire them to not only create, but maybe just be able to move on. And I find a value in doing whatever I've ever done, being able to put it out there in that. And one day, someone will discover this, and someone will have intellectual discourse surrounded around this, and they will experience my creativity while I was here.
Yep.
And hopefully they'll feel enough about it or value it enough to share it with others and keep my name alive. I really want everyone to continue to work toward their art and in their art. Even if it's just you enjoy singing and you're not really good at it.
Yeah.
There's a value in the cathartic experience of allowing yourself to release through those mediums. I found it, and I found it to be true. And it's on any, on any level, not even professional. Just do it to get it out and share it. If anybody can gain anything from this conversation, is that there's a value in the shared experiences of man. And if you choose to showcase it through art, understand that people will find it and experience it and find value in it. And it might not come back to you to where you were told or you had heard that that's what happened, but just know it's enough in sharing. And I'm working toward being that first director to win the Oscar for Academy. I'm here with the surprise. I said I wasn't going to say that on the show, but that would be, something else that would be the icing on the cake. For it to be me, for it to be you, for it to be one of your children, one of my children.
Yep.
That would be something else too that I would take great joy in. But I want to thank you for having me I've always wanted to be on one of your shows. I've always been in your films, and I can't wait to get back to filmmaking with you as well and working with you
Absolutely.
behind and in front of the camera.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Those times are invaluable.
It's funny because something you said earlier, like you saw us as a potential of being like a Hughes brothers, as a Coen brothers, and I always saw that, and I've always wanted that for us. And I think this moment is something to encapsulate, probably, to push us to making that happen.
I agree. And I love what you're doing with your podcast. I love what you're doing with your podcast, all your careers, from filmmaking, when you had your apparel line, to your podcast. I love what you're doing. I love how you've always just taking chances, and wherever the spirit has taken you, you've always just done great things. So I've always wanted to be on one of your shows and have a conversation with you. And I want you to understand what this means to me, for you to have had me here and speaking with your audience and sharing this experience with me. And I didn't want to miss for them to say, check me out at Filmbomb BK at Instagram and YouTube and Facebook. Check me out at Adult Film Productions, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Also, look out for Master Teacher that will come out later on this year, 2020, as well as Do or Die, a Best Bad Chess documentary that will also come out this year, 2020. That was just, I had to do a little shameless post right there.
No, I appreciate that, and we're going to put everything in the description. And I just want to let you know that it's just as important for you to be on my podcast, because you have supported me in every endeavor that I did, from picking up the camera in high school and asking you to and the photography and the picking up that black and white, manual camera and learning from there. And I really appreciate that. And I just want to let you know that you inspired me in many ways you probably don't even know. Back, I can still remember a conversation here. You talked to Angel about the movie Reservoir Dogs, and what that made me want to say, and I was younger, and I was like, I got to find this. And that was way before on demand, where you had to like wait to see something or go to a blockbuster movie, but always exposing me to different forms of art, whether it be in music, putting me onto neo soul, putting me onto the best hip hop, putting me on to movies. One of my favorite movies of all time, Grease, is one of the movies that you showed me. And just being a person in my corner saying, you could do it. Sure, you can make a movie. I'll be a part of it. Sure, you make a podcast. I'll be a part of it. And that's important for us to keep going, just as brothers, sharpening each other. Yeah. But also sitting down and having these conversations and putting it on YouTube like we're doing it right now, and hopefully sharpening some other people. And this was just a great conversation, one of many that we're going to have, and one of many that's going to happen in this series of me sitting down and talking to creatives, talking to business individuals, and just providing some value for people out there in whatever time. We're living in a particularly interesting time, but the internet is going to allow these conversations to live forever. And thank you, Terrell Tuggle.
Thank you. Just say one more thing to your audience before I go. This is Terrell Tuggle, owner and operator of Filmbomb BK and Adult Film Productions.
Yep.
I have 2 productions coming out this year. That's The Master Teacher, as well as Do or Die, Best Bad Chess documentary. I also have a small boutique theater for film, art, music, and fashion in Brooklyn. It's called the Esoteric Theater. It's at 1436 Atlantic Avenue. So come out and experience and share to the esoteric atmosphere we've created there. Thank you for having me on this show. I can't wait to come back and speak to your listening audience again. I had a wonderful time. And what's crazy? This is actually just one of our regular conversations, which is actually shorter.
Yep, right. The other day we were on for like almost 3 hours.
I love you, my brother.
I love you too, man.
Yeah, my family out there. Thank you once again. It means the world to me. Thank you.
Perfect. I'm just going to close it out. I'm Justin Brandon. This was the Automan podcast experience. We had a great one. We were sitting down with a filmmaker, a businessman, a creative, a forward thinker, and we just had a great conversation. And we're going to continue these conversations. And this is it for this one. We're out. Peace.